was 7 years old, and this was the same disease that Carlo actually passed away from. And so that's kind of when the devotion started. And just seeing like this kid's intercession is extremely powerful for the youth and for the world, especially right now. So it kind of leads into this past summer. I was working at Camp Waitua, as Celia said, and with Emily and Sarah, which was a huge gift, just out in the Colorado mountains. And I was kind of assigned the patron saint Carlo Acutis, and so I had to learn a little bit more about him, but I also knew a lot. And so Carlo's story is quite interesting. He was actually born in London, England, and his parents moved to Italy when he was just an infant. And Carlo's mother was born and raised Catholic, but she only went to Mass 3 times in her entire life. So that was at her baptism, her first communion, and her marriage. So Carlo was raised in a household where, okay, you know, she was Catholic, but not really, and so not really a Catholic household that he was in. Where his story kind of starts to develop and Mother Mary kind of starts to take a hold of this young kid is when he was 5 years old. His parents get a babysitter for him, and this babysitter has a great devotion to Our Lady of Fatima and John Paul II. She was one of John Paul II's like youth. She was just on fire for the Holy Father. And what she starts to do with this young 5-year-old Carlo is every time she would walk him to school each morning, she would walk him by the chapel, and she would just teach Carlo. She would say, "Carlo, Jesus is really here." And so you'd take this 5-year-old and be like, "Hello, Jesus," every single day. And then she slowly taught him the rosary. And this is kind of like an extraordinary grace, right? I mean, at 5 years old, I wasn't doing this even though I was, you know, born and raised Catholic. But Carlo started to understand like that is truly Jesus in the Eucharist, and that's kind of what started to spark his devotion to the Holy Eucharist. So after his first babysitter, 2 years later, he actually gets another one at the age of 7, and his name was Raj, and Raj was actually a devout Muslim. And so two contraries, right, completely opposites of the spectrum for religions. Raj, devout Muslim, and Carlo, the 7-year-old. Carlo had just recently received his first Holy Communion, and he tells his mom afterwards. His mom hadn't been to Mass in, you know, who knows how long. And he tells his mom after he receives his first Holy Communion, he says, "My life's plan is to always be close to Jesus," at 7 years old. And his mother wasn't going to Mass, and his father wasn't either. He gets his babysitter, Raj, who's Muslim, and Carlo keeps on doing the same things that his first babysitter taught him. Every time he walked past the chapel, he would say hello to Jesus. He would bring Raj inside with him. Every time that he was walking to school, he would pray the rosary with Raj at 7 years old. And the only reason we have these stories is actually because after Carlo's death, Raj later on converted to the Catholic faith because of this young man's witness, right? So we're saying, you know, I'm 21, like I have no like impact on other people, but it's like if a 7-year-old can do this, we have a bigger impact than we think. So Carlo continues to grow up, continue to live this life of super, you know, extraordinary virtue. And at the age of 12, his parents get him his first like computer and laptop, and he starts to learn how to code, and he learns how to put together websites. And the first thing he starts to put websites together for is Eucharistic apparitions, and so his Eucharistic miracles. And so he compiles over 183 Eucharistic miracles throughout Italy. One of the biggest throughout Italy and throughout the world. One of the biggest being Lanciano, Italy, and this was in the year 750, when this monk was having doubts during Mass about the true presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. So the monk's going to say, you know, "This is my body," and as he's saying it, he's like, "I can't believe this." And he lifts up the host, and immediately blood trickles down from the host. And this is year 12,000 or 1,200 years ago. And immediately this monk just drawn to tears, right? He believes it's truly Jesus in the Eucharist. And Carlo's so drawn by this Eucharistic miracle that he starts to compile even more and more and puts them on this internet database. What's interesting about this Eucharistic miracle is that in 1970, so this is 1,200 years later, they actually did studies on this same host that they still have. And on this host, there's actually found that the blood on it is AB. So AB type blood is the same blood that is found on the Shroud of Turin, which is the shroud that Christ was actually buried in. And so the same blood that was on this host was the same blood that's on the Shroud of Turin. The other thing about this host, the blood that they tested they found that the blood, where it came from, was actually from the heart. And what's interesting about the heart and the blood that was tested is that the blood and the heart tissue that they were able to look into with a microscope was extremely stressed, of someone who had suffered greatly. And so you can, as a Catholic, you can kind of come to this conclusion, wow, and we look in the Ark Chapel as well, right? We see the Shroud of Turin and these markings, a man who has suffered greatly for us. So this is something that's driving Carlo to push out these Eucharistic miracles. What's interesting is his mother talks about Carlo doing these Eucharistic miracles, and he's compiling them all, and she, on 5 separate occasions, had to buy Carlo a brand new computer, because as he's compiling these Eucharistic miracles, his computer catches fire, right? Talk about like a powerhouse of grace that's about to be poured out to the world through this young man. His computer catches fire 5 different times, and I was looking at different things that have caught fire throughout Catholic history, one of them being the Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin, actually, the box that it was in, the church caught on fire, and it was almost burned, and yet it was saved, right? Something that has brought a lot of Catholics back to belief in the true presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. Another thing that's caught fire was the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, which actually holds what is believed to be the crown of thorns, another thing associated with Christ's passion. And then a final thing, where just showing the powerhouse that Carlo is about to become, John Vianney, who is said to have, a confession line of 3 hours, because this man converted so many souls. His room one night caught on fire, and his sister comes down and she's like, John, your room's on fire. And he's like, oh, it's just old Bluebeard, it's just the old devil, right? Because he's like, I'm converting so many souls. And so we can know, like, okay, this is about to bring a lot of people to God. So Carlo is continuing to do this at 12, 13, 14 years old. He compiles these Eucharistic apparitions, miracles. He also compiles a series on the Blessed Virgin Mary of over 100 parts of her apparitions. And then finally, he does another series on the 4 last things: heaven, hell, purgatory, and the final judgment. And he compiles this all on his own website and promotes it throughout the world. And so that's, throughout his early years, that's kind of what he was doing. And another thing at his school, right, it wasn't just only online, but also at his school, he was bringing people back to the Catholic faith, and also just calling his brothers to higher virtue. A lot of his friends were struggling with, pornography and all these different temptations of the flesh. And he told them, he's like, you must love Jesus, you must come back to him. And he was abstinent, he was very strong in his belief for the young people, and he tried to bring them back, and people were drawn to this young man's fervor and sainthood. One of the things he told his friends was, you sit below the sun in Florida to get like a tan, but you sit before the Son of God to become a saint, right? You sit before Jesus in Eucharistic adoration, that's where you become a saint. And he made it extremely simple, right? We're not called to this great, okay, we have to make this giant database of Eucharistic miracles, but he just says, my life's goal is to be close to Jesus, and all you have to pray for is the desire to be a saint. Just pray for the desire to be a saint, right? So it's not something great, it's just something simple, as Saint Therese of Lisieux kind of put it. Anyway, Carlo goes on, he's 15 years old at this point, and on October 2nd, he gets diagnosed with acute leukemia. This is the same disease that my younger brother Luke at 7 years old was diagnosed with. Extremely aggressive cancer, and he goes on chemo immediately, but the doctors find it's too late, and the doctors are telling him, you have maybe a few weeks to live. They tell his mother, your son doesn't have past this week. What's amazing is the doctor's testimony of Carlo's death. Carlo, lying on his deathbed, the doctors were just stunned. This man, he's 15 years old, and he's smiling, and he tells his mother, he says, I'm not afraid to die, for I've lived every single moment for Jesus Christ, and I have not wasted a single moment for him. And that's like, whoa, bulldozer to the face, right? For us, like, how often have I wasted a moment trying to be someone else other than a saint? And Carlo's mother, like, when reporters have asked her, like, is she sad that her son has passed away? And she's like, absolutely not. He's been raised to the heights of sainthood, right? And so it's amazing to see what happened after Carlos, that what he did during his life, but then also after his death. So he passes away in 10 days, right? October 2nd and October 12th. He passed away on October 12th, 2006 at the age of 15 years old. And it's this challenge for us now. It's like, okay, if we live each day as if we only have 10 days left, right? Okay, today, what if I were to say, you have leukemia or you have this sickness and you've only given 10 days to live? Would you be a saint by the end of those 10 days? Would you be a saint today? And that's a challenge for us to kind of get in that mentality and ask Carlo for his intercession. And I just want to talk on just the miracles that were attributed after his death that are his cause for canonization and why he's going to be a saint. So the first miracle to make him a blessed was there was this young Brazilian little boy named Mateus, and he was born with a messed up pancreas that every time he ate anything, he just throw it up. And so he was actually having to go in for surgery at the age of 4 years old. And the doctors were like, we don't think we can do this surgery because he only weighed 20 pounds at 4 years old, because he just couldn't take anything down. He was only eating smoothies or a feeding tube. And so the doctor's like, they're telling his mother, like, he's not going to survive. And so she has recourse to the Blessed Virgin Mary, and then she hears about Blessed Carlo. And at that time, the local priest was bringing around a relic and doing a healing apparition or healing tour with Carlo's relic, and she says, okay, I'm going to take my son. And so it's actually on the feast of Carlo's death in 2010, October 12th, that this little boy at 4 years old goes to this healing service, and he's sitting, and the priest says, there's 100 people in the crowd, and he says, as I come up to you, just pray whatever you want from Carlo. Just ask for his intercession and touch the relic. So he's going around to all these older folks, and they're asking for a healthy death or healing from it, different things. And he gets to this little boy and he cries out, I want to stop throwing up. I want to stop throwing up. And the little boy Mateus says, like, immediately he was like, I'm cured. He just believed it within his heart. And so they actually go home, and he's like, I want a burger and french fries, Mom. And so he eats this giant burger and french fries, and he doesn't throw it up, and it's like absolutely insane. Like, how is this kid not throwing up right now? Like, he goes to the doctor a few days later, and they're like, we don't know what has happened. Like, your pancreas has literally re-healed itself. We've never seen this happen in our lifetimes or any of the diseases. And so that was the first one approved to get him, make Carlo a blessed. And then a few years later in 2020, there's this lady, 24 years old. She's riding her bike in the early morning, and she flies off the front of it. Her head goes straight into a tree, and she's in straight up trauma and coma. And so they take her to the hospital, and her brain is swelling so much that they actually have to cut a part of her skull off. And the doctor is telling her mother again, it's like, there's no hope for your daughter. She'll pass away very soon. So her mother, Liliana, she's from Italy. She drives all the way to Assisi, where Carlo is actually laid to rest in his tomb. And so it's 6 days after the event. She's driving to Italy. She gets to the tomb, and she kneels down at the tomb of Carlo. And the doctor said on that same day, her daughter puts her head up in her bed. She begins to move and talk, and the swelling completely goes down, right? A woman who they thought was completely dead, who was going to at least be paralyzed, just completely healed. And so this was the second miracle that's now he is going to be a saint, right? Pope Francis declared that he will canonize him a saint in the year 2025. And so you have a powerhouse of a saint that you've taken as a co-patron, especially for this generation, and especially for us all to take as, ask him to give us this desire to become great saints, right? And give us this desire to make it to heaven one day. The final thing I would leave you with is, it's private revelation, but it was a dream of St. Francis of Assisi. Antonia, Carlo Acutis' mother, had a dream of St. Francis of Assisi about a few years after his death. And St. Francis of Assisi reveals three things to Antonia, Carlo's mother, that are very extremely important for the youth of our time. And I shared them with the youth of some of the young men over the summer, and just changed our lives, seeing miracles, kids one of the guys over the summer, his dad was atheist, mom Catholic, but he hadn't been to mass or confession a long time. He was like, how can I believe in God if my dad doesn't believe in God? 2 of his uncles had committed suicide within the past 6 months, and I told him about Carlo Acutis, and immediately like this shift, right? I want to be a great saint. And so Antonio gets revealed three promises. The first, St. Francis tells her, your son occupies a very high place in heaven. Carlo Acutis occupies a very high place in heaven. The second being, and this was before he had any miracle approved, is that your son will ascend to the heights of sainthood very rapidly. And so he died in 2006, and now he'll be canonized in 2025. Within and under 20 years, he will be canonized as saint. And so we can take that as an affirmation of this revelation. The final thing he says, which is absolutely most important for everyone here, and it's kind of changed my life and the lives of many young people over the summer, was St. Francis told Antonio, when your son is canonized a saint, the youth of the world, the young people of the world will be given extraordinary amounts of sanctifying grace to become the greatest saints of our generation. To become the greatest saints of our generation. Extraordinary amounts of sanctifying grace. That's Carlo, who shouldn't have become a great saint because his mom didn't even go to church on Sunday. And God puts in his life this woman who teaches him the rosary and teaches him catechesis. That's extraordinary grace. We're put in a town, Ave Maria, Florida, at Ave Maria University, where we do consecration to Our Lady twice a year, right? Praying the rosary, Eucharistic adoration. We're given a chance to become the greatest saints of our generation right now. And it doesn't start by doing great things, but as St. Therese says, just doing small things with the greatest love. And that even entails just any suffering that we do through our sports, through academics, through our family life. Anything that we can offer, small or great, for the greater glory of God. That is what we're called to do. And so I leave you with that, and I pray you have a great rest of your season. And blessed Carlo Acutis, pray for us.
Woo!